So today we're going to talk about something that you're pretty much used to. It's a topic that you've looked at even in your algebra classes, and that's the topic of slope. So before we even get talking about what we know about slope, I want to know what you know about slope. So on your worksheet, let's take a look at our worksheet here, and let's turn that around so it's actually facing the right way. There we go. On our worksheet here, I want you in this box to write down everything you know about slope. Take a moment to do that. Okay, so one of the things you probably wrote on this, maybe you know some things about where you've seen slope. Stairs have slope. Ski slopes. Okay, maybe you talked about rise over run. Maybe you talked about m. Maybe you said y equals mx plus b. This one worries me. Okay. When you say y equals x plus b, I worry. This is not slope, okay? That's the equation of a line that we're going to talk about later. The m is slope, but the rest of this is not the slope. So let's talk about what slope is. Slope basically is a measure of steepness. It's a way to tell how much you're moving upwards when you're moving to the side. So it's a measure of steepness, and it's often written as a fraction. Okay, we've seen this over and over again. We tend to use fractions more than decimals when talking about slope. So how do we get slope? Well, first thing you ever learned about slope was rise over run. That is the easiest way. You can count upwards is your rise, count over is your run. Then you may have learned a formula that looks something like this: y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So that's the difference in the y's over the difference in the x's, which in science they often write as delta y over delta x. Delta in this case means the change of, so that's the change in y over the change in x, the change of the rise over the change in the run. Because remember, your y's, when we're looking at an xy plane, this is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. So when we talk about rise and run, we're talking about going from one point, how far up you go, and how far over you go. That is what we calculate as slope. So this is your delta y, and that is your delta x. Okay? How we can then use this formula to actually calculate. If you've got a graph, you can flat out count it. But when we've got numbers, it's a little easier to actually calculate it. So I'm going to write my formula again. M for slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And these are my x's and y's. What some people like to do is they actually like to label this x1, y1, x2, y2, just to help them get that idea better. So my equation is going to be 7 minus 3 over 6 minus 1. 7 minus 3 gives me 4. 6 minus 1 is 5. So my slope is 4/5. Now, some people ask, does the order matter? So let's take a look at a little something. Let's take the same problem, and let's say I did it the other way. Let's say I went 3 minus 7 over 1 minus 6. Well, that's going to give me negative 4 over negative 5, which is also 4/5. So the order that does not matter, which of these you call your x1, y1s, x2, y2. It matters that once you decide what your first one is, well, you can't see that. Once you decide what your first one is, your second one has to follow. So this, if these are my ones, then they have to be together in the same point. These two have to be together in the same point, okay? But it doesn't matter which method, y2 minus y1 or y1 minus y2. Just follow the same on the bottom, okay? Knowing that now, try one on your own. Find the slope of this line. Go. Okay, so hopefully you calculated this to be, let's see, y2, that's just a mess, minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I always write my formulas, at least for the time being, because the more I write my formulas, the more likely I am to memorize them. So 4 minus 3, or 7 is negative 3. 6 minus 3 is 3. That gives me a slope of negative 1. Okay, slope of negative 1. Easy as that. And you don't have to leave those 1 over 1. We can simplify whole numbers. Okay, very good. Let's look at another part. So let's say that we've got a slope and we've got a line given to us. A little hard to see the graph, but you've got the graph on your paper. Find the slope of AB, the line that passes through 4, 7, and 4, 3. Okay, go ahead and find that slope. Okay, so my slope, 3 minus 7, 4 minus 4. So that's going to give me a negative 4 over 0. And you can't divide by 0. If 0 is in my denominator, we have a problem. So this ends up being a null set. Okay, this is called the null set, by the way. You could say it's the null set or it does not exist. Whoop, can't spell. Or basically you could just say no slope. Okay, the null set is basically the set of all numbers that don't exist. So this slope does not exist. How about if we try this one? Find the slope of EF, 1, 3, and 8, 3. Give that one a shot, see what you get. So this time when I do my slope, I get 3 minus 3 in the numerator and 8 minus 1 in the denominator. So that's 0 over 7. This time 0 is in the numerator. So the answer is 0. Let's graph these lines and see what they look like, these two. So AB, 4, 7. So that's over 4, up 7. So that's going to put me there. That is point A. 4, 3. So that's 4 and 3. 1, 2, 3. So that's going to put me there. There's point B. And if I connect those, we get a line. What if I connect EF? So E is at 1, 3, so over 1, up 3. 8, 3 is 5, 6, 7, 8, 3. There's that. There's point E. There's point F. So that line goes this way. What kind of line is AB? How would you describe that? How would you describe EF? Now, I would look at this and I'd say AB is a vertical line. And I would say EF is a horizontal line. This lets me in on some information. The slope of vertical lines, does not exist. Or you could say it is no slope. The slope of horizontal lines is always 0. Okay? So that allows you to easily tell what kind of line you have based on the slopes. In fact, we can look at lines and talk about their slopes just by looking at the pictures of lines. Take a look at these lines here. Tell whether these lines are positive slope, negative slope, 0, or undefined slope. Go for it. Slope of AB is going downward. We read from left to right, so AB is a negative slope. CD is right there. So there's that vertical line. So that is no slope or undefined. Either answer is appropriate. EF, we're moving upwards. So that's a positive slope. And GH is horizontal. So that's a 0 slope. Notice again, 0 slope and no slope are not the same thing. It's kind of like having no money in your bank account or not even having a bank account. So that's the type of difference between 0 and no slope. Okay? All right. So far, so good. This is probably information you've worked with. So let's give you a little bit of classwork. I want you to calculate the slopes of these 3 lines. Okay? Take your time. Double check your arithmetic. We'll take a look at these answers when you're done. Go for it. Okay, so the first slope, I'm going to do 15 minus 7. Those are my y's. Get the cat hair away. And negative 6 minus 12. Watch your double negatives. People make a lot of mistake on the double negatives. Hey, if you had to use a calculator here, use a calculator. There's no shame in that, okay? So I'm going to pull my calculator out, and I'm going to say 15 minus 7 gives me 8. And negative 6 minus 12 gives me 18, negative 18, which I can reduce that. Let's see, I know 2 goes into both of those. So that's going to be negative 4 over 9. Always reduce your fractions. You passed algebra, always simplify. Okay. Next one. My slope will be 11 minus negative 8. Minus a negative leads to a positive. Okay, so that's minus the negative 8. And negative 1 minus negative 17. So that double negative gives me a plus. So I've got 19 in the numerator and 16 in the denominator. And 19 is a prime number, so that's pretty much all we got there. 19/16. I'm perfectly okay with improper fractions, okay? You don't need to change that to like 1 3/16. We don't care. Leave them improper. It's easier. We actually learn a lot more information from an improper fraction. Last one here. So my slope, I'm going to do 18 minus negative 7. 18 minus negative 7. And I'm going to do negative 3 minus 14. So let's see, that turns into 18 plus 7. I'll punch that in my calculator and get 25. Negative 3 minus 14 will give me a negative 17. 17 is a prime number, so nothing's going to break down. So my slope is negative 25/17. You could leave your answer like this, but I have a tendency to swap my negative. We're used to seeing negatives in numerators more often than denominators. So that's why I sort of rewrite it as a negative fraction. Okay, so slope, something old, nothing new. That gives you some work that you want to try. So try these 5 problems for homework. And also, as you finish this, I'm going to assign a delta math for you to work with. Okay, so there's going to be a delta math on slope that you should work on right after you finish this video. You could either do this now, then do delta math, or you could do the delta math and do this at home tonight. Okay? Have a good night.